This week it's Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and I titled it Time and Eternity. And we will see how this actually fits in what Solomon is teaching through this part of it, of how we are looking at things in time where we exist, and we need to be looking more of the way things are working in eternity, where God is. God is in eternity. Now, eternity, understanding it from a perspective of no beginning, no end. Now we have a beginning, but we do not have an end. But God is neither a beginning nor an end. So the eternal aspect of who God is and how God operates and what he has been doing and what he's going to do. And all of this with God happens outside of time. So we have to learn to distinguish between time and eternity. Time is a very important factor when it comes to God's plan. God created time, and he established when certain things were going to happen. Now, the primary aspect of God's plan, the central reason for God's plan, is our salvation and the coming of Jesus, to be born, to die, to rise again. This all happened in the time frame that God established. Sometimes we wonder, why did Jesus come in that time of history instead of now, instead of 100 years ago? It all happened exactly when God wanted it to happen. Some of the aspects of the timing we can understand. It makes sense. Others we really don't know. And we're going to see from this chapter how that part is actually true. So first of all, to start off with, they're going to go through a few things in New Testament that talks about time and the coming of Jesus. In Jude 1, to the only God, our Savior, through Jesus Christ our Lord, be glory, majesty, dominion, and authority before all time and now and forever. So all of these things about who Jesus is, before time, now, and into the future, unending. In John 7, so Jesus said to them, my time is not yet here, but your time is always opportune. See, this is, the disciples were asking Jesus about this and about that, and Jesus says, now is not the time yet. But you and we always have opportunities to take advantage of them. In Galatians 4:4, but when the fullness of time came, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law. You see, God had a plan that at a certain point in time, Jesus would be born. It was going to happen exactly when God said it was going to happen, and that plan was always in place since before time even existed. In Ephesians 1:10, with a view to an administration suitable to the fullness of times, that is the summing up of all things in Christ, things in heaven and things on earth in him. Fullness of times, not just time, fullness of time, the summing up. Okay, everything that Christ did, was going to do, and still is going to do, that is summing it all up together. The things in heaven and the things on earth. All of these, all of time, all events are built around Jesus. In John 7:30, so when we're seeking to seize him, and no man laid his hands on him, because his hour had not yet come. See, an interesting aspect, they tried to kill Jesus earlier, but because it wasn't time, because it was not established yet that it was going to happen the way that God had ordained it was going to happen, they couldn't. See, nothing could happen to Jesus until the fullness of that time took place. Couple more. Luke 23:43. And he said to them, truly I say to you, today you shall be with me in paradise. Of course, this is with Jesus' death on the cross, speaking to the thief. The thief's time was today. In Matthew 24, verses 36, 37, and 42. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like in the days of Noah. Stop right there for a second. This is talking about Jesus' return. And when that's going to happen, the only one that knows that time is God the Father himself. So the warning to us, verse 42, therefore be on alert, for you do not know which day our Lord is coming. We don't know it. It's not been revealed, and it will not be revealed until it actually happens, because if you look, it says, as in the days of Noah. In the days of Noah, everybody was just living their lives. It was just another day, and suddenly God closed the door of the ark, and the rains came. Now into Ecclesiastes. Let's see how this all fits together. All of life has boundaries. Things are going to only happen at the time in which God permits. Now, we think that we're kind of controlling it. We're really not. But there are a lot of aspects of life which we do have control over, but still things are going to happen in God's timing. So verse 1, there is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven. Okay? Life's events are not random. You were not born in a certain place on a certain day and a certain minute by accident. It happened exactly as God preordained it to be. Why were you born when you were born? Why weren't you born 100 years sooner or 100 years later? Because God ordained that birth time. We talk quite often about that. God has ordained when we will die. That's set. Okay? Well, that's true. But he also ordained when we were going to be born. And not just when, but also where. For us, we were born, you might say, in really a great time in a great country. And the vast majority of the world's population do not have the advantages we have. Not even close. We don't recognize how different it is because we're not there. We don't experience it. And even for those that, you might say, go and experience it now, it still isn't the same as if it would have been their entire lives. But everything has an appointed time. Life events are not random. And every one of us can look back and see a certain instant that took place, looked random, but it changed the course of our life drastically. If that thing would not have happened, our lives would be totally different. And there's probably a fair number of those things through our lifetime that we can point to. But all of these things actually were laid out. God had a plan. And certain things were going to happen in a certain way, in a certain time. The next section, and even part of this first verse, has some really fascinating things in it. When you first read it, it's just like, that's interesting, let's move on. But let's find out why we don't just move on. Verses 2 through 5a, and remember 1b also has some of this, but there's a time to give birth and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. And then verse 5a. Keep this one in mind. A time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. Now we pick up at 5b through 8. A time to embrace and a time to shun embracing. A time to search and a time to giving up what was lost. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear apart and a time to sew together. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. There are 7 a time for in the first 4 verses. There are 7 a time for in verses 5b through 8. But verse 2 starts off with mankind, a time to give birth, a time to die. Verse 8 ends with the nations, a time for war and a time for peace. In between is all of the things in life that are building up to it, as an individual or as a nation or as a group of people. But in the center of it, the center of verse 5a is unique. Remember, we have the 7 and then we have the 7, but in between the 7s, we have a unique verse. Okay? And it's unique because it's the only one that speaks of an object as opposed to actions. See, all the other ones are talking about actions. And then on top of it, we have all the rest of them are very easy to understand what it's talking about. But verse 5, a time to pick up stones and a time to throw stones, like, what does it mean? But notice its location. It's in the middle of 2 sevens, 7 being a number of perfection. But it doesn't clearly state what it is. Unless we go back, and there's a whole bunch of theories out there of what it is. But every one of them that comes forward with a theory says, this is my theory. I don't know. I'm guessing. There's one of them that talks about how an enemy would cast a bunch of stones onto somebody else's land to prevent them from planting crops. Right. May have something to do with it, maybe it doesn't. And I really don't think it does. I think it's really not what it's talking about. I think by deciphering this section and looking at it totally differently, instead of looking at it as a time to give birth and a time to die, life, okay, a time to plant and a time to uproot or to pick the harvest. What if we looked at this as this was all talking about our favorite subject, Jesus? It changes our perspective on what we're talking about and the way that we see it, and then maybe that stone isn't so strange. I'm not going to go through every one, okay? So it's not like I'm going to lay this all out, every single one. A time to give birth and a time to die. The time in which Jesus was going to be born was established by the Father, and the time he was going to die was established by the Father. A time to plant and a time to uproot. Jesus came and planted the seed, and then he gave to us the seed of the gospel. Okay? But then it had to be uprooted. And if you look back at the early church, it started in Jerusalem. But then when Jerusalem was attacked and destroyed, the church was scattered. So it was uprooted from where it was, and it was sent out into the world. We can go through each one of these and see this. So does that mean now give us a different perspective on the stone? A time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. What very familiar event took place in Jesus' ministry that dealt with stones? No, during Jesus' ministry, the temple being thrown down was a prophecy But there was something that actually took place that happened. And this was, I think, here again, I will put this back into my opinion. That's referencing back to the woman caught in adultery. And everybody picked up stones. And did they throw them? No, it wasn't time to throw stones. It was time to scatter. Like I said, we can go through each one of these, but I'm not going to go through, so far we've covered, just a short little piece of the chapter, and eventually we're going to run out of time. You know how time goes on. Apparently so. All right? That was my phone making noise when it shouldn't have. Okay, moving on. Verses 9 and 10. So what profit is there to the worker from that which he toils? I have seen the task which God has given the sons of men with which to occupy themselves. Our daily lives, and for a lot of us, our daily lives are different now than they were a number of years ago when we had to go to work, punch a clock, work our day, punch the clock, go home, have the weekend off, maybe get 2 or 3 weeks of vacation a year. That was our routine. Or something similar. There was a routine to it, okay? So, God has given the tasks to occupy themselves. And we're going to see this here in a minute, how that goes a little bit further. We have routines in life. And if we're faithful people, we're dependable people, we show up at work on time, we work diligently, and then we punch out and go home. Now, it varies with some people. I have one great uncle who's long dead, so I can pick on him now because he can't say anything, who went to work in a factory, and his job was to take a rack off of an overhead conveyor, turn around, and put it on a rack over here. He did this for 30 years. For 30 years, he transferred racks. Finally, it came time to retire. He had got his pension, and within a couple of years, he was dead. His entire life was built upon transferring racks. Looking at the clock, waiting and waiting for it to get to that end of the day, which probably would be like 3:30, whatever, so that he could punch out and go home and relax in his recliner until he had to go to bed and then have to get up and go back to work and punch in at 7 o'clock in the morning so he could transfer racks for another 8 hours. And he did this for 30 years. I think that I would have done away with myself long before the 30 years, but anyway. But if we look at life, there's a lot of things that we did over and over and over again. Early on in my working life, I worked at an evergreen nursery, and there I planted seedlings, which is basically a little stick with a leaf on it. Only these were evergreen, so it'd have needles on it. And we would plant 250,000 of these into a certain area. Okay, I did that area 3 times. Right? So that's almost 1 million of these. Take it from your hand, stick it in the ground. Take it from your hand, stick it in the ground. Okay, now this is over a period of a couple of years. But anyway, repetitive. Thankfully, we don't all have lives that are that, and as we move forward in this lesson, we're going to see that life isn't all this just monotonous. Verse 11, he has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their hearts so that the men will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning even to the end. Now, where it says appropriate in our translation, a lot of translations use the word beautiful instead. And it pretty much can be either or. Okay? God has made everything beautiful in his time. God has a plan for everything, and everything is to bring out that appropriateness or that beauty of what God had ordained is going to happen. And he said eternity in our hearts. I heard a really interesting survey report the other day on the radio. Did you know that the vast majority of people, whether they call themselves religious or not, believe that there's an afterlife? Right? And that kind of surprised me, and then I'm looking at this lesson and I'm saying, no, God said that was already the way it is. Right? He said that he set eternity in our hearts. See, just like God has set a conscience inside of us, regardless if we want to believe or not believe, every human being has a conscience. But every human being also has something that I really didn't realize before, and that is a concept of eternity. That there is something beyond this life. Now what, or to spend any time thinking about it, totally different. But I'm talking about just basically thinking there is something. Which when we stop and think about it, this is a huge opportunity for us to share the answer to that question. What is beyond this life? So man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning to the end. Because God is outside of time, because God is before time, and because time is not something that God is trapped by, we are. So we can never fully grasp what God has done in the past and what he's going to do in the future completely. We know bits and pieces, but not completely. So he has put that eternity in us, but it also has left us with something which, even in the meaningless tasks of life, we know there's something more. See, if we live generally, and some people don't, but I think the vast majority of people always look, it will be better down the road. We go through life with that mindset. Okay? Now, the uncle who transferred racks probably didn't. But anyway. But we live with this yet to be fulfilled longing. And we should have that still. We know that we have not completed everything that God has for us. So we are looking forward to what that is yet. And that we're looking forward will always be there in this life because we are in this time. But that also is a gift from God. So then Solomon moves away a little bit from under the sun to kind of get a little glimpse of what his overall picture of teaching is. So in verses 12 and 13, and actually 14 and 15, we are moving away from that concept of vanity and hopelessness and worthlessness to a glimmer. I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every man who eats and drinks sees good in all his labor. We faithfully go to work. We faithfully do the tasks that we are called to do. We get our paycheck every week or every 2 weeks or whatever it is. And we're grateful for it. Right? And we say, yes, this is a gift from God. But before the fall, Adam was given work to do. So work in itself is neither good nor bad. But it was meaningful what God gave Adam to do. It was all part of God's plan. Verses 14 and 15, which is continuing on the same thought. I know that everything God does will remain forever. There is nothing to add to it. There is nothing to take from it. For God has so worked that men should fear him. That which has been already and that which will be has already been. For God seeks what has passed by. There is a pattern in life. It has always been this pattern in life. Okay? And the pattern in life is going to continue from generation to generation. God has laid forth a plan. God has laid things out on how they are to be. And it will remain. That pattern is not going away. Now we can take and try to mess up the pattern, but overall God's plan and God's pattern will stay in place. What will continue to happen is babies will be born and people will die. You can add taxes to that list, but that's not a concern for at this moment. God has laid out a pattern, and that pattern is going to be. It's always been, and it's always going to be. It has been in the past, and it's going to be now. But there's a glimmer of hope if God judges man's heart instead of us judging. The little switch into the New Testament for a moment. In 1 Corinthians 3, verses 10 through 13. According to the grace of God which was given to me, like the wise master builder, I lay a foundation and another is building on it. But each man must be careful how he builds on it, for no man can lay a foundation other than the one which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if any man builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, each man's work will become evident, for the day it will show it, because it is to be revealed with fire, and that fire itself will test the quality of each man's work. You see, if our work is to build upon the foundation of the master builder, the foundation of Jesus Christ, and because if we do it on our own, the next generation comes along and builds upon our foundation, it will be worthless. But the master builder, which is Jesus, Paul clearly stating that. So if we build on that foundation, and regardless of what we build on it, with whatever we use, if we use gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, just give it a whole list of various building materials. But he doesn't mean materials. He means lives. He means commitments. He means how we build upon the foundation of our forefathers. And we build relationships. The idea of having spiritual children, spiritual grandchildren. Do we have those? Did we build that foundation? Did we help to lay the foundation of Christ? And are we building on it? Now we go back under the sun. Verses 16 and 17. Furthermore, I have seen under the sun that in the place of justice there is wickedness, and in the place of righteousness there is wickedness. I said to myself, God will judge both the righteous man and the wicked man, for a time for every matter and for every deed is there. The wicked continue on doing their things, the righteous continue on doing their things. But God will judge each. There will be a time, here we're back to time again. There will be a time in which God will judge the righteous and the wicked. All the things that are done as we are building that foundation, are we building that foundation on Jesus Christ, or are we building that foundation on the world? Because the world, apart from eternity, after the fall, we still strive to cultivate creation meaningfully, but are consistently frustrated in this effort. Mankind, since the beginning, has tried to build societies that are what we would call utopias. That has always been going on. It has always failed. It has never worked and never will work, because the foundation is always this world instead of Christ. See, we will see that world. We will see that world where the foundation is Christ, and there will be a utopia. But for the world, it doesn't exist. It can't. The efforts will always be frustrated. In verse 18 through 20, I said to myself concerning the sons of men, God has surely tested them in order to see that they are but beasts. For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts is the same. The one dies, so dies the other indeed. And all have the same breath, and there is no advantage for man over beast, for it is all vanity. All go to the same place. All came from dust, and to all return to the dust. Now this is almost like, what do you mean there is no difference between man and beast? I thought that we were created in the image of God, and henceforth that we are special and unique. We don't die like the animals die. Well, Solomon here is just laying out some basic fact. The basic fact is that we are made from dust, and we will return to dust. But so will your dog. So will your cat. So will the cow, okay? Solomon is basically stating a fact that he's not talking about eternity, he's talking about our physical bodies, where we have no advantage. We think we do. There's a guy by the name of Dean, and I don't know if that's his first name, his last name, when he lived, whatever, because I can't find a thing on him, but here's one of his quotes, okay? Somebody I quoted from, I guess, from somebody else, but the distinction between man and beast is annulled by death. The former boasted superiority, his power of conceiving and planning, his greatness, skill, strength, cunning, all come under the category of vanity, as they cannot ward off the inevitable blow of death. We consider ourselves superior to the animals, but like the animals, we too shall die a physical death. Verses 21 and 22. Who knows if a man ascends upward and the breath of the beast descends downward to the earth? I have seen that nothing is better than that man should be happy in his activities. For what that is his lot. For who will bring him to see what will occur after him? Solomon has got kind of a mixed emotion here at the end as he closes out these last two verses. And it's mixed because there's 2 points of view that he's looking at. He's looking at the point of view from mankind, earthly perspective, and mankind from a Jesus perspective. Okay? Because it talks about there's nothing really that's better than a man should be happy in his activities. Solomon is saying we should enjoy our activities. And it wasn't until about 1648 when something was written that really clarifies this so much more, and that's known as the Westminster Shorter Catechism. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it's been around since 1648, so it's been around a while. But it starts off, the first question and the first answer. The first question is, what is the chief end of man? And the answer is to glorify God and enjoy him forever.